Hello, and welcome to the Narrowing Path, Walking the Spiritual Walk. My name is Steve Van Iderstein. Thank you all for joining me again tonight as we do the next chapter reading from the book I Was a Pagan by XII. Now, this is the book I will be reading out of, as I usually point out. Let's see if we can get it into focus. There it goes. Okay. And you can also get your hands on this copy of the book. This is a reprint, but it's a facsimile reprint exactly of what was written in one of the original editions. So I'm looking forward to it. We are on chapter 12. We've gotten quite far in this whole thing. I can't believe how fast it's gone, to be honest with you, even with a couple of hiccups along the way. So I'm looking forward to it. And this is a very relevant one, I think, for many watching. And it's an important one to keep the principles of spiritual lifestyle in mind for. And when we're going through this, I'm excited to see how it applies again. I enjoy reading these. So this chapter is called The Business of Making a Living. And if you like what we do here, if you like this channel, if you like the chapters, readings, the book we pick, and just the commentary on them, please go ahead, give us a like, give us a subscribe, let us know what you think. Comments, all that good stuff. You know, we have a Facebook as well. You can follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts too, if you'd like. And it's been a great experience for me so far. So, and this is the third year we're going into of the podcast. We started January 1st, 2023. We started with videos in 2024. So, you know, we're just chugging right along here, trying to share this. So I hope y'all are enjoying it. And so here we go. This is the 12th chapter of the book I Was a Pagan by XII. Chapter 12. This business of making a living. Economics. 5 years ago, if anyone had asked me why I went into business, I would have said to make a living. The truth is, however, that I was in business not just to make a living, but a better living than the other fellow. Our modern system of economic competition, I believe, started in the days of the robber barons, and some of that same strain still seem to be running in my blood. Rough figures show, for instance, that if America's total wealth, not only in dollars, but in sheep, goats, automobiles, and every other form of property, were divided equally among everybody, everyone would get a share amounting to $2,500. Remember, this is in the 1930s. New wealth, of course, can be created, but not at not at anything like the rate demanded. Should individual desires in the matter all be satisfied. It might take 100 years or more, for instance, just to double our present wealth and give everyone a claim of $5,000. That's changed. He underpredicted that one. However, I did not want $2,500, nor $5,000, nor twice that amount again. I wanted $20 million and nothing less. And since new wealth could not be created fast enough to give me that amount in my own lifetime without taking some of the existing limited supply away from someone else, I was quite ready and willing to do 4,000 or 5,000 people out of their shares, in order that my personal desires might be satisfied. I did not face this fact frankly at the time, nor admit the folly of so many people bitterly and stupidly competing for so large a share of such limited supply of wealth. I simply shrugged my shoulders, allowed that business was business, and if other people didn't have jobs, well, it was too bad that they didn't have the brains to get them. Now, however, I am ready to admit the folly of all this and more. I am ready to admit that, in company with countless other descendants of the robber barons, I was nothing but a genteel racketeer. In advertising, for example, I held a gun to people's heads, more subtly perhaps, but just as surely as any highwayman. I held the gun of business fear. I used high-sounding terms when I advised my customers to build up consumer acceptance and demand, but really meant to give the veiled threat that your competitors will force you out of business if you don't advertise. And your advertising will look sick in comparison if you don't use my particular and superior brand of advertising brains. Since several hundred other advertising agencies, moreover, might be aiming the same sort of gun at the advertiser's head, I was led from time to time into cutting a competitor's throat whenever possible, or finding, as I justly deserved, that he had cut mine. Advertising volume, like anything else in our material economic world, is strictly limited in supply. There is not, and never will be, enough to give each advertising agent as much business as he would like. I saw every opportunity, therefore, to fatten my income, stooping even to the petty padding of my expense account in a firm where I myself was partner. I overcharged my customers when I thought I could get away with it. I strained points of honesty in my advertising copy and lied freely face to face. I used liquor and the ladies to help us secure business and impure suggestiveness to catch attention in the advertisements that I wrote. I took all kinds of steps to see that no other fellow got ahead of me when I was working for a boss, and formed my own company so that should the economic shoe begin to pinch, I would be in a position to fire the other fellow instead of getting fired myself. Finally, I began to see through myself, and I tried accordingly to cover up by dignifying advertising, promoting it in my conversation, at least from the ranks of a game to the ranks of a profession. I referred to the high standards which have made good advertising an economic and social force of vital importance to us, a phrase I adroitly borrowed from the President of the United States. And I agreed most heartily when a postmaster general said, "To the advertising man is due a great deal of credit for the upbuilding of our country, making it the richest and most prosperous land in the world." I soon saw, however, that this sort of tripe was getting us nowhere. The fact that they were upbuilding the country did not prevent competitors from undermining me and stealing my best accounts. Clearly, something should be done about it, and it occurred to me that perhaps, after all, I should begin to work not merely to make a better living than the other fellow, but for the sake of better advertising. If advertising could be cleaned up and my competitors would turn honest, then I too could begin to play the game on the level. As usual, therefore, I began to work out schemes of reformation for the other fellow. I envisioned an advertising world with all of the bunk cut out, with no claims of superiority for this brand or that, with no belittling and no underselling of competitors, and with no secret rebates or other undercover inducements. I championed a system which would bring all methods, prices, costs, and volume of production out into the open, which would prohibit overproduction. I foresaw, in fact, the need for controlling production in relation to legitimate market demands, dividing production volume and coordinating production effort among our 7,000 different trades and industries, shortening working hours to fit into this smaller volume of business, and dividing these hours in turn among all men who needed the work. Again, however, I ran into the old difficulty. What was going to make people want to debunk advertising, reveal their costs, and limit their production? Since their robber baron forebears, businessmen had been motivated by acquisitiveness. Nothing else seemed to be effective, and no other motive has ever succeeded in making most men work. Where men do not want to, of course, it is obvious to think that we, who know better, must devise a better system for them and force them into doing the right thing. Naturally, therefore, I thought of advocating laws which would make false and misleading advertising, cost concealment, and overproduction a misdemeanor, punishable by fine and imprisonment. In the fiasco of prohibition, however, I had seen that where desire is suppressed and not removed, it simply squeezes out in some other and more sinister direction. I knew that manufacturers, advertising men, and bankers could not be made honest by law, and I knew that any attempt to limit private profits where private profits are still a man's chief desire in life would result only in his finding some way to bootleg those profits. I had, in fact, seen such bootlegging result from almost every form of business restriction ever imposed. What then? An advertising man suggested some years ago that the instincts of selfishness and greed could be overcome by giving men the opportunity to work for honor rather than the privilege of growing rich. How many businessmen who himself had been offered vice president's title as a substitute for an How many businessmen who himself had been offered a vice president's title as a substitute for an anticipated raise in salary could seriously advance such a suggestion is, of course, beyond my comprehension. Then I saw nothing left except the possibility of leading men through reason into recognition of sheer folly of their unlimited efforts to gain a hog share of limited wealth. If I could give them some other quest, I thought, a limitless quest, which all could share without robbing anybody else, and which all would make the main endeavor of their life, then they would be willing to cooperate in business just to gain a necessary living while finding their real pleasure, honor, and desire in my other goal. Knowledge, I decided, was the only other possible goal. Here, indeed, was limitless supply of something most people wanted. All could pursue knowledge without ever reaching the bottom of the well, without stealing from others and knowing the richer themselves and growing the richer themselves the more they gave away. I thereupon worked out a theory of intellectual economics to replace our system of material economics, making knowledge the main pursuit of life and material pursuit a mere secondary interest supporting this main quest. I think I might have gone a little mad on this subject had I not met the Oxford group and learned not a material economy, not an intellectual economy, but the spiritual economy of Christ. This experience confirmed by the fact that men are made honest neither by the adoption of new laws or of new systems, nor by the adoption of new ideals. They are made honest by a love for God, discovered through Jesus Christ. This fact forced home the knowledge that if I wanted to do anything of economic value in the world, I would better have to give up my aim of making a better living than the other fellow. I would have to give up the rest of my days to be used primarily to bring people to Christ and thus build better men. This work, as in all other cases, had to start not with the other fellow, not with the advertising competitors, but with myself. Christ could not make me morally contagious. Other businessmen could not catch honesty, unselfishness, love, and purity from me unless I possessed those qualities myself. And I found that with the power and the knowledge that God gave me, it was possible to apply these qualities in business, even in the business of the pagan world. When I first drew back from the Oxford group's challenge, for instance, I told them it would be utterly impossible to go back and start being honest in the advertising business. Then was an evasion on the face of it. That was an evasion on the face of it. I meant simply that it would be difficult, embarrassing, and probably unprofitable. God showed me, however, that it was not only possible to be honest in advertising, but to be unselfish, loving, and pure. On the first day of my return, he gave me courage to hand my partner a check for the estimated discrepancy in my expense account. Then, as miracles began to happen, he guided me to the discovery of a check I had folded up, put away, and forgotten, made out to me for the exact amount he had guided me to give my partner. The next day, he guided me to open a magazine I seldom read, to turn directly to a page in a paragraph which gave me the suggestion as to how I could be wholly honest in the advertising that I wrote. Then, at the bottom of the depression, came the offer of a substantial campaign from a client who asked me to split commissions. God told me to sever my connections instead. As for purity, the suggestive touch I had previously used had disappeared from my work, and I no longer appeal to out-of-town customers through the lure of limitless scotch and nightclubs. As for loving business relationships, I have felt neither feeling of resentment nor gesture of retaliation towards the competitor who spirited away my best paying customers last January. As for unselfishness, I am now, as God has guided, on part-time work in my own company at less than 10% of my one-time salary, and thus am retaining several employees I could have selfishly dispensed with by doing their work myself. The most remarkable result of all, however, is that, faced for the first time in my career with any real cause to fear for myself and family financially, all anxiety and fear has flown out of the window, never to return. God has time and time again vindicated this faith in Him by taking care of our needs, as each such need has arisen. Banks have been closed, but God has always kept open for us some way to live. He has, for instance, guided me in certain business deals. My partner was afraid that in my new life I would miss many business opportunities because, as he put it, I was likely to be out somewhere saving souls when an opportunity arose. He, however, was the one who happened to be out, not saving souls, when such an opportunity did arise. My guidance of the morning told me to make no plans for the evening, but to be on hand and ready to seize the opportunity that would arise. At another time, now just about a year ago, God guided me to make a certain investment in an enterprise I had never before known about, and which I would not have considered on a human basis. Guidance, however, was insistent. God promised that this investment would give me more time and opportunity to do His work. It has been that very investment which has made it possible for me to take time to write this book, to make certain trips with Oxford Group teams, and to engage in other phases of creative spiritual activity. My experience of Christ, moreover, has made me a better businessman, not only from a spiritual standpoint, but from the standpoint of efficiency and responsibility. As described in my trip to New Haven, I immediately began to find new interest in my work. I tried not simply to get my advertising copy approved, but to get it improved, even if that meant sacrificing words of which I was inordinately proud. I also found a better flow and control of ideas. One day, for instance, God guided me to write a plan for advertising transatlantic steamship travel. It was a branch of advertising in which I had no experience, and a subject I knew nothing about. I asked for God's help in the matter, and almost immediately, a complete and original plan came to my mind. In dependence on God, moreover, I no longer am worried as to whether or not I secure new business. I am no longer, therefore, anxious and strained in soliciting accounts, and that makes me a very much better salesman than I have ever been before. And, as a servant of God, I am as interested in the whole order of business as I am in my own small corner. My mission is to fill my small part of God's whole purpose, and I want to make the best possible job of it. I also find that my whole business day is better arranged. Where I used to plan the day, making a list of all the jobs I thought I had to finish, all the people I thought I had to see, all the phone calls I thought I had to make, and all the letters I thought I had to write. I now simply ask God's guidance on the day. He strikes from my list all the jobs, visits, calls, and letters that would afterwards have proved unnecessary or untimely, while at the time he reminds me of matters I myself had not considered. He also fills my day to a nicety, laying out just enough work for me to finish in an easy, natural stride without fuss or strain. This guided business day, of course, may not prove as profitable financially as some self-determined days. As has been written of the followers of Christ, however, they may never succeed in accumulating a large estate. They may fail in their business operations, but they do not fail in their end, which is to perform useful work, and thus they can never be overwhelmed with disappointment. God, meanwhile, provides the necessary living for all who rescue themselves to Him. At the Cavalry Rescue Mission for Down and Outers in New York, for instance, members of the Oxford group in charge report that every man who surrenders to God wholly and unreservedly is invariably shown the way out. I know any number of such cases myself, and I know any number of businessmen who, since their surrender, have found experiences exactly similar to mine. There are, in fact, not simply individuals, but entire firms surrendered to Christ. There are businesses turned over to God, and Christ literally steps in to direct them, not simply in policy, but in the business conduct of each individual and the business details of each day. My office is located on 42nd Street and 5th Avenue in New York, and in this locality, each week I have been meeting with a member of the New York Stock Exchange, a member of the Curb Exchange, a real estate broker, and an oil and gas prospector, an engineer, a banker, a motor specialist, a Notre International lawyer, the head of a travel bureau, and an efficiency management expert. Visit any of these men unexpectedly in their offices and you may find them talking business, but you are just as likely to find them talking to a businessman about his deepest spiritual needs and leading them to surrender his life also to the great economist, Jesus Christ. In this group, we discuss our various business problems as God has guided us to work them out. We seek and check guidance on the next steps God wants us to take in our business affairs and in winning other businessmen. We are used by God to aid each other's spiritual growth economically as well as spiritually. And knowing that the task of coordinating some 7,000 trades and industries in this country and many more throughout the world is beyond the power of any but the great coordinator himself. We seek his answer in solution to the economic tangles of this day. This small group is but one of many Oxford groups of businessmen meeting in New York City, in Philadelphia, Washington, Louisville, Akron, Cleveland, Detroit, Kansas City, Phoenix, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Vancouver, Toronto, Winnipeg, Montreal, Ottawa, Quebec, London, Manchester, Edinburgh, Paris, The Hague, Cairo, Geneva, Cape Town, Johannesburg, Pretoria, and various other cities and towns scattered through some 40 countries of the world. All have found the same answer. While the only permanent, stable, and worthwhile change in economic conditions will come, not primarily through any change in laws, but primarily any change in economic system. All have found the same answer, that the only permanent, stable, and worthwhile change in economic conditions will come not primarily through any change in laws, not primarily through any change in economic systems, but first of all through the change in businessmen. They found that no matter how his surface conduct may be forced to conform, a racketeer at heart will remain a racketeer until his heart is changed. They have found that until they give themselves with their whole hearts to this limitless conquest of spiritual growth. Men will continue to pursue the selfish quest of wealth, or will find themselves caught in the dreary, drab routine of a socialized control. They have found that a personal experience of Jesus Christ is the only thing that sets men's hearts on this limitless economy. They have found, as I have, that they cannot give men this unimaginable and vital experience until they have it themselves. And there we go. That is the end of chapter 12. And there was definitely some interesting things to talk about in that one. I really enjoyed it. I'm excited to go through. We'll do the review next week, of course, and we'll see what we can come up with from that one. There's a lot of great information actually in it, and there's a lot of just perspective to take. And this is a topic that's going to hit home for a lot of people. So I'm looking forward to your feedback and responses. Please don't hesitate to let us know, and we will be back again next week with the review. So until next time, thanks.